Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jerred Moon. The Garage Gym Athlete Podcast is a result of my desire to build better humans, unequivocal coaches, and autonomous athletes. I've spent the last several years obsessing over program design, nutrition, and every other way you can optimize human performance. This podcast distills the latest scientific research with what I've learned and blends it with the not-so-scientific field of mental toughness. We are here to build you into a dangerously effective athlete. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find out more about our training at garagegymathlete.com. And if you want to pursue more into the field of coaching and programming, head to endof3fitness.com. Thanks for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jerred Moon here. Welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. So it is just me today, me and you. So I'm going to be going over some new stuff we're going to be doing in the podcast here to introduce 2020. I'm going to give you a few recommended resources and then also talk about goal setting. So this podcast, in all honesty, is for those who, have been around Endo3 Fitness or Garage Gym Athlete for a longer period of time. You're, kind of serious and committed to making change, because there are a lot of different places you can get information, places you can consume content, and I understand that. So those of you who listen regularly, have left the reviews, who follow the programming, all those things, I really appreciate you being around and sticking to it, and I hope you understand and realize I'm very committed to your success, and that's why I would like to do podcasts like these. Something maybe not super well known about me, but goal setting is something that I teach. I've run workshops on it. I do this for business owners, entrepreneurs, athletes. I really like to dive deep. So I'm going to give you kind of the framework for the goal setting process that I teach, that I walk myself through every year, my team, my company, other entrepreneurs, other athletes. This is the framework that we go through. It's very effective. There are kind of two versions of this. The version I'm going to give you today is kind of the quick and dirty, but just know that I could expand this into a 6 to 8 hour workshop, which I have done numerous times in the past. So we're going to start with some other stuff. I just kind of want to let you know what the purpose of this podcast is. It's going to be a little bit shorter than normal. We're not talking about research, studies, or anything. I just really want to set you up with having a good 2020 by setting the right goals and making sure that you're moving in the right direction going into this year. So a few things for 2020 from us as a team. First, the Killing Comfort book. I know I've been talking about it for a while, and I will continue to keep talking about it because it's not out yet, but it is coming out this year, coming out 2020. Really excited to get it out to you guys. There's a lot of great information in the book, and it's very applicable, all about killing comfort, and that's kind of this year's theme for a lot of athletes, myself included, making sure that you kill that comfort. You get uncomfortable, and you get uncomfortable in the right places to see success, because killing comfort is not this idea of just doing stupid things that make you uncomfortable because that's somehow always going to make you better. That's not actually true. You can do things the hard way. I could lift a barbell with bad form, while swinging a kettlebell at the same time, and that would be really hard and very uncomfortable, but it's not very smart, and it's not going to really move me in the right direction. So killing comfort is way more strategic than that. It's way more surgical and precise, and there's a lot of planning involved. And so that is what the book is going to uncover. It's not just going to be this, do hard things and you get better. That's so overplayed and overdone. That's not what the book is. The book, it definitely is about killing comfort, but it's killing comfort in the right places so you see your results, and that's kind of what the goal setting I'm going to go over today. Make sure you pick the right thing that's actually going to move you forward. Now, if you do want to be a part of the release of that book, go to killingcomfort.com. I know a lot of you already have, and I appreciate that. So that's the book coming out in a few months here in 2020. Next thing, the podcast. The podcast is changing in a pretty significant way this year. This week is the last week in which we have one podcast, at least for the duration of this year. So we are moving to 3 to 4 podcasts per week here in the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. So previously we've been doing seasons where we would do, interview anywhere from 8 to 12 athletes, and we would kind of drop that once per quarter. And then after that, we would go, weekly on doing a study, a topic, and going over the Meet Yourself Saturday workout. So that's all going to change now that we're moving into 2020. We're not going to be dropping seasons anymore, but I know a lot of people still want to hear from athletes, so don't worry, that's not going away. What we're going to be doing is make sure I don't screw up the timing. So Mondays will remain the same. It's going to be a typical episode where we dive into some research, aimed at making you a dangerously effective and autonomous athlete. We'll talk about a topic in the industry or just something that interests us, something that can make you a better human. And then we'll also go over the workout. So Monday episodes stay the same. And then we have Wednesday and Friday episodes. So Wednesdays will become the Ask Me Anything. You've heard me talk about that a lot. You can still submit garagegymathlete.com/AMA. Submit your questions, feedback, whatever there, and I'm going to be answering it in both video and podcast format. So those will be shorter in nature, probably about 10 to 15 minutes. Monday will still be that longer podcast. Friday will be the snippets, or what we're calling cooldowns. And so this is all going to kind of be, it'll start next week. You guys get to see it all, but this is pulled from either previous Garage Gym Athlete episodes or going back to the Better Humanology podcast days, where we pull out these snippets. It's something to cool down with your week with, and it's just something super actionable that we pulled. I interviewed so many great people. There's so much great information, but it's hard to keep it all in your head. And so what we've done is we've gone over past episodes, pulled out the best nuggets, either from a guest I interviewed or just conversations we've had on this podcast, and we rehash it. So some of them are 2 minutes, some of them are 7 minutes, but they're pretty short, just to give you that nugget and let you move on. And then also on Tuesday or Thursday, we might switch it up a little bit. We would love to continue doing athlete interviews, so have an athlete of the week. We already have a bunch of athlete of the weeks recorded and ready to go. So doing interviews with athletes will be an ongoing thing, almost on a weekly basis. And so that will be something really cool and something that we think will be awesome. So that will still be happening. So I say 3 to 4 because if we can't find an athlete to interview or whatever, that's the only one that really becomes optional. The other 3 I mentioned will be happening on a weekly basis for the rest of this year. So that's what you have to look forward to here on this podcast. And then lastly, I'm really excited to get into Garage Gym Athlete training for all of those subscribed to the programming. I really appreciate you being subscribed to the programming, and we have a lot more coming at you. If you missed the webinar, we published it as a podcast last week, and if you were on the webinar, that's great, but we are striving to always make the programming better. That's what we're doing. We're reading the research, we're diving in, we're testing new things, and I think moving, one big thing that changes this year is all of our deload weeks become our body geometry balancing programming. And that's something new, but I think it's something super strategic that's going to help if you are training with Garage Gym Athlete for a long period of time, like a year. I think it's going to be huge. I think, just how good I feel about our training right now is like, 10 out of 10. Sometimes I feel like we're missing something or we need something. And right now I feel things are really good, but that's because there's something I probably don't know. And so that means I need to keep reading, keep researching, and never get comfortable, find out how I can keep sharpening the spear and making things better. But right now, I think that we're really at the forefront, and I'm excited for all of our athletes to dive into this next cycle and really, benefit from being a healthy and optimal athlete over the course of a year. So we don't do movements that are here to injure you. We want you to be an athlete with us for a really long time. We want to focus on you being healthy for life and for your family and for a very long period of time. So never compromising health for performance. And that's our stance, and always has been, and it always will be. There's a lot of new stuff coming out, and I'm just really, I don't know if excited is the word, but research on high-intensity training, we've talked about it. I think that a lot of that stuff is the truth to what we've been talking about is going to start hitting mainstream, I think, over the next 2 years. This is just kind of my prediction. I think that a lot of this high intensity model that people have been following, it's not good, and it's not going to be good. And we're going to find out the damning ramifications of such if it's something that you do over and over and over again and never properly recover. It's almost like you can't be an extremist when it comes to biology. Something always comes back to bite you. So I'm not going to get into that any further, but it is a topic I want to explore more in 2020 and dive into, and from a research-based mindset, not an opinion-based. And to be honest, most of my opinions on that are from research, not from how I feel about a company or a methodology of fitness, because really I don't see a lot of other fitness methodologies out there as competitors. They're just different ways or different approaches. But when something is hurting human beings, I think that people need to step up and say it. And I'm not talking about hurting from you did the snatch incorrectly and you hurt your shoulder. I'm talking about more from a biological process. Anyway, that is something we will be diving into, and something I really want to dust off and uncover a lot more next year. So you can expect a lot of that in my research and things that we select over the course of the next year. I want to keep you guys informed, autonomous, dangerously effective, and that is about it. So really excited for all the things that we have coming in 2020. Hopefully you guys are too. Now let's get into kind of the goal thing, the goal process I want to discuss in today's podcast. So recommended reading for everybody. I talk about it every year. I kick every year off reading this book. It's The One Thing by Gary Keller. So you can get that audio book, or you can get the hard copy. Either way, it's a relatively short book. And this is really pretty much, I was handed this book by a mentor right when it came out, and it's been my, quote unquote work Bible for a long time. It's really how I've managed my life, both business, personally, professionally, everything has come from that book. And I don't want to give it too much credit because there's not much magical about it, but there is something magical to picking one system and working with it. I read a lot of books, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, but if you are always bouncing all over the place and you're super scattered, you're really never going to see any progress. So I decided the kind of the one thing methodology for goal setting and for working was kind of my thing. And I kind of just committed myself to it. And, I've seen a lot of results, both personally and professionally, from just following the framework, not questioning it. And a lot of that was because I got to work with Gary Keller down in Austin, specifically. And one of his mentors was my mentor. So I just have a lot of exposure to him specifically. And so that's why I love his book. That's also why I love, believed in his book and his process. And so that's why I've kind of stuck with it. And it's the same in athletic programming or endeavors. We talk about program hopping. A lot of people who are checking out all these other programs or reading these other ideas and bouncing here, bouncing there. Like, yeah, okay. If you would just believe in somebody, believe in something, whether it's our program or programming or some other program, like believe in it and stick with it. And stick with it for a very long duration, because that's where the results are going to be seen, and it's very uncomfortable to do that. So that's kind of what I've stuck with over the years, and it served me really well. And it's something I think in the world we live in now, there's just so much information. You got to pick somebody, trust somebody, and go with it. And in a lot of different areas, whether that's spiritually, whether that's financially, whether that's physically, whatever it is, your training, your nutrition, you kind of have to pick something or someone and be like, this is it. This is, this is what I'm going to do. Not to say you shouldn't continue educating yourself and reading new things and all that other stuff, but if you find something that's fairly, harmless to stick with and do and just believe in, then I highly suggest doing it. And that's what I've done with The One Thing. Another book is Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a really great book. I think that I was working deep work style basically from The One Thing. One Thing almost recommends how this should be done, and then Deep Work came out a little bit later. And I've read Deep Work, and I work in a very deep work fashion. So I'd read that book as well. You can get a lot of that from The One Thing, but a lot of people have recommended that book to me when they heard I was a big fan of The One Thing. I read it, and I do definitely think it's good. So recommended reading for this podcast, specifically The One Thing, if you haven't, and Deep Work. And if you have read The One Thing, I suggest you read it again. Like I said, I read it every year in January in about a day or two just to make sure I'm on track and focused for the next year. Now, last thing here on goal setting, we provide a lot of information on goals. And so 2 things I want to point you to. Really just go to the show notes. If you are listening to this and you're like, hey, I want to dive in. I want to get more. I want to get some worksheets and hammer this stuff out and watch some videos on it. You can do that. So go to the show notes. I have 2 videos with 2 different downloads that have a lot of the forms, or two forms that I'm going to mention today. And so you can download that. It's called our Simple Goals Framework. And so you can go there and, watch me on video doing a, 5 to 6 minute tutorial to fill out these forms and kind of have your goal worksheet for the year. So go to the show notes, into3fitness.com, head over to the blog, and you will see this podcast, and you'll see the show notes, so you can go there and hit up the simple goals. And then another thing, this is really only for athletes specifically who are subscribed to our programming. If you go into the app, you go to More, Documents and Links, there's going to be a goal link there. So some of you have done this before, but what it is our accountability system for goal setting for our athletes. So if you didn't know that you have access to this, you do. And so what it is, you enter in your account information, just name, email, and then you enter in your goal. And then we hold you accountable. So what you get is an email series reminding you of your goal, making sure you're on track. If you're not on track, being able to reach out to a coach and communicate with getting back on track. So it's something I really highly recommend doing at the kickoff of a new cycle, especially at the beginning of the year. So it's in the app, like I said, More, Documents and Links, and then you can click on the goals section there, and you can submit your goal to us, and we can hold you accountable. All right, diving into goals now a little bit more. So there are 2 documents, and like I said, you can download these things and watch the shorter videos that I have on these, but there are 2 documents. One is called the 135, and the other one is called the 411. Something we use internally here at Into3 Fitness. It's something I've used, like I said, personally, professionally. And what you're really doing, the 135 stands for 1 goal, 3 priorities, and then 5 strategies. So if you look at it as a tree, you have 1 goal, and then you're going to have 3 priorities that are going to help achieve that 1 goal, and then each priority is going to have 5 strategies. This should be able to fit on 1 piece of paper. So anytime I set out to have a goal, my goal has a 135. And I really want to push everybody listening to this to do this at some point, because we've interviewed a lot of athletes now. And I mean, I've talked to thousands of athletes, on 15-minute calls and coaching calls. And the "I don't really have goals" comment comes up quite a bit. And that's fine. And they, it's normally, hey, I don't really have goals. And then they circle back to, I just want to be healthy for my family. Well, that's a great goal. Now my question would be, okay, well, how can you be healthy for your family? What does that look like? Because that's what I get a lot of times. So I'm guessing if you listen to this, you might be in that boat where you're like, you know what, I don't really. And I get it. If I don't have a back squat goal for 2020, I'm not trying to, back squat a certain amount of weight. And that's what people think I mean when I say, what's your goal? I just want to know in general, what's your goal? It doesn't have to be a mile time. Like we're really metric driven, just because we want you to see the progress. And, some people lose 20 pounds, whatever, but I think being healthy for your family is way more intrinsic. That's great. But what does that look like? Or how do you get it done? There has to be a conceptualization of that. So does that mean you're training 3 times a week, once a month, 5 days a week? Like, what does it look like to be healthy for your family? And what does that look like to you? So could you draw that out and really, find out what that looks like? And as opposed to saying, I don't really have goals, what is your goal? So for me, my big one goal for fitness this past year was to hit 300 training sessions. And I achieved that actually pretty fast. I think it was the beginning of or somewhere in the fourth quarter, towards the beginning, I got to 300 different training sessions. And so I smashed that one. And it was good, but I didn't, in retrospect, I wasn't a huge fan. I should have put more parameters on it. I wasn't a huge fan of that goal. I had a lot of consistency, so that was awesome. But I should have had more parameters. So I have more parameters on it now. So if you don't know this, at Garage Gym Athlete, we have what we call the Killing Comfort Patch. And the only way to get the Killing Comfort Patch is to maintain 80% consistency within our training. And so I want to get the Killing Comfort Patch every cycle over the course of the next year. So there are 4 training cycles that we will run, 4 12-week cycles, and I want to get the Killing Comfort Patch in all of them. And so what does that actually mean? You're like, well, what are you doing? What have you been doing? I follow Garage Gym Athlete programming, and I always have, and I always will. And the only thing that's different is you have to actually fill out everything in the app. And so I want to make sure that I'm filling out all those things in the app and not skipping anything. And the most important thing, or the thing that would really snag me for not getting the Killing Comfort Patch, is the recovery game. So we have a recovery game in our app, and I don't always fill that out, but I really want to make that a habit, because getting the training done is not that difficult for me. That's just been ingrained. It's a habitual thing for me to train on a very frequent basis. That's something I do, just a big part of who I am. And I focus a lot on recovery, but not at the 90 plus consistency over the course of the year. There'll be days where I do everything, days where I don't, and as far as the recovery game is going. So I really want to maintain 80% consistency. With the training, I don't think that's going to be a problem, but like I said, I want to do it in all of the other areas too. So the recovery game is going to be big for me. I want to maintain it there. So really, it's just overall, I want much greater than 80% consistency. The only reason I say 80% consistency is because the Killing Comfort Patch, the only thing that would knock me down is probably travel. So I'll travel a couple times over the course of the next year. I don't travel a ton, but it will jack up the training a little bit. And so there will be, jumping to some bodyweight programming or whatever is what I'll do. But making sure I fill out that recovery game. So now I have a lot more parameters. I still want to probably hit over 300 training sessions for 2020, but I really want to fill out everything in the app and hold myself accountable to, hitting the recovery game, because that just makes such a big difference in training when you're super consistent with those kind of things. So that's one thing I'm going to do. And this just give you an example. So my big one thing for the year is getting that Killing Comfort Patch every cycle. So that's my big one thing for the year, because that means I have to train a lot. That means I have to recover really well. That means I have to make sure I fill out every single thing in the app, track everything. That's such a great lead domino for 2020, and that's what I want. That's what you're looking for with this one thing. So going back to the 135, what I was talking about. Now I have my one goal. Now I need 3 priorities to support that one goal. And so what would the priorities be in this case? I could, and now I'm going to kind of jump to other things and just give you some ideas. So if my one thing is getting the Killing Comfort Patch every single cycle in 2020, my priorities could be, consistent training time, making the app use habitual, and then, I could set aside a time for recovery activities. So those could be my 3, just to give you an example of how easy this truly is. So then I would have those 3 priorities, and then the strategies would go down. And this gets fairly simple from here. So if I wanted to work out a consistent time, I could be like, okay, it's morning time. What are some strategies to working out in the morning? The 5 strategies could be really easy. It could be setting an alarm. It could be laying out my clothes the night before. It could be making sure I get enough sleep. There are a lot of different strategies that would help that priority. And then for, going to the recovery, setting aside time for recovery activities. Okay, what is, doing this every night, making this habitual, tracking in an app, all these other things I could do, strategically to help that priority, and that priority is going to help that goal. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm not going to go through everything of mine specifically because I just want to give you, I don't want to make this about me and my goals. I just kind of want to give you an illustration because I know hearing this process is harder when you don't see it. And so that is kind of how this works. So you need to pick that one goal, and I told you what mine is. And then you need 3 priorities, and each priority needs a strategy. And now we do this in business as well. And our business one still fits on one page. It's still one goal, 3 priorities, 5 strategies for each priority, but it's a lot more complex. It's not as simple as, there's a lot more work involved because there's a team of people. There's a lot of tasks. They're just really big. It's going to take the full year to do, and so will the personal goal and fitness there. But just know that this can be as simple and easy as you want, or robust and, not, I wouldn't say complicated, but like very robust and still achieve a lot of things. So like I said, I use it for my personal fitness goals as much as I do for business growth over the next year. So it's very important, and it's very great framework, and it all fits on one page. And that's the 135. And so if you want to download one, watch a little bit more videos on that, you can just hit the show notes. Now, you do need to find your lead domino. And this is some pushback I get when people hear me talk about the one thing. They're like, what's my one thing? I can't find it, and should I really only ever be focused on one thing? And I've started to call this the focus fallacy. And this pushes back against a little bit of the information inside of the one thing, but I think that it makes people feel bad when they don't feel like they can't figure out what their one thing is, or they don't know what it should be. And I like to point to, pilots and a professional chef is if you were to look at a pilot and they're flying the airplane, you would be like, okay, yeah, their one thing right now, they're flying the airplane. Great. Okay, now a chef. They're in the kitchen, they're preparing a world-class meal. So what's their one thing? They're preparing a meal. But that's a very broad brush. If you were to go into the pilot's cockpit and start documenting what they're doing, you realize they're cross-referencing multiple different gauges and different measurements, and they're talking to people, and they're using both hands and both feet. They're using their eyes. Like I said, they're communicating. There's actually a lot of little micro processes like going on to just do this one thing that's called fly the airplane. But you can paint that broad brush of, hey, they're just flying an airplane. No big deal. Simple, right? But they're doing a lot of stuff, and that's really hard to do. And it takes a lot of time to learn how to do that. So don't feel bad if you feel like you should only ever be doing one thing. One thing is juggling a lot of other things. And same with the chef. If you were to give me, well, let's not say me because I'm not a very good cook, but if you were to give someone who's a fairly good cook, Joe is a good cook. If I gave him all day and I gave him, and he had expert instructions on how to prepare this world-class meal that Gordon Ramsay makes, he could probably do it. But Gordon Ramsay could probably do that same thing in like 30 minutes. And that's the difference between world-class and someone who's not world-class, right? And a chef is not just making a meal. The reason they can do it so fast is because they're amazing at juggling multiple things at once. You got 5 burners on, they're mixing something over here in the mixer, and like there's just all these different things going on. But if we just wanted to paint the broad brush, we would say, yeah, they're just cooking a meal. But there's a lot more going to that, and the juggling is what makes the person great. If it took a chef, several hours to cook a meal, every single one of his or her meals, they wouldn't be very good. They wouldn't be very good at what they do. It's adding that speed element. It's being able to do everything quickly and multitask. And that's, like I said, that's goes against a little bit of what one of the things that the One Thing book says, but I truly feel like it needs to be said because people feel bad and they can't find their one thing or whatever. So likewise, I have a one thing focus for fitness. I have a one thing focus for business, but guess what? I'm also a father, a husband, a brother, a son. I'm juggling a lot of different things in my life, and that's what is going to make me a professional. It's not, if all I had to do was sit here and focus on Garage Gym Athlete and that's it, that'd be awesome. Garage Gym Athlete would be amazing. But I would much rather be juggling having 3 kids and having a wife and doing all these other things and activities and stuff and trying to figure out how to make business work at the same time. It's a lot more fun, but that's what makes me professional. And so just keep that in mind and don't feel bad if you're like, I should only be ever focusing on one thing and screw everything else. That's not really how it works. You need to become a professional by learning to juggle multiple things and doing it well, but focusing on what's important and removing anything and everything that you feel is insignificant or not important to you. So don't get wrapped up in the focus fallacy. We can all focus, but we have a lot of other stuff going on, most everyone. So you now know what the 135 is. You know what the focus fallacy is. Now going down from there, there is another document, and I'm just going to go over this one quickly. It's called the 411. So it's 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. So really you set your one goal, and you typically write that at the top of the page. And then after that, you'll have your monthly goals. So typically personal business, I'd say 1 to 3, 1 to 5, something like that. And then lastly, you'll write down your weeks. So you have your annual goals at the top, your monthly goals, and then your weekly goals. So week 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I know this is kind of hard through audio, so please hit the show notes up so you can download these forms and go through our simple goals video and download these worksheets and everything. But now you're taking your plan, your big plan that you made with the 135, and you're transcribing that to the annual goals, and you're like, okay, for this month, what is it I want to do? Because if any of your goals involve habit formation, that is not an easy process. So if you think, I just quickly mentioned a few things for my goal. If habit formation is in there at all, one habit per month, like max. That's all you should be doing. And so my January goal could be like, okay, let's make this recovery time activity habitual. And so let's set aside that time and do that. So I'm not trying to tackle everything on the 135 at every second or at every day, at every week. And this is another place people get hung up. You're supposed to do that annual plan you make in the 135 slowly over the course of the year. So you want to make sure that it's going to fit that. And if you mark things off, great, then you can fill more things in. But you need to make sure that you're slowly building and getting everything really concrete. So, for instance, if you have a big goal and anything's habitual, then guess what? That's your January. January is establishing this one new habit, and if you screw it up, you know what you can do? You can try again. That's what you need to do if you screw it up, because you are going to screw it up. I'm going to screw it up. New things are hard. They are uncomfortable. And it's going to be okay if you're not perfect, because nobody is. A lot of people throw away their goals, their dreams, because they screwed up somewhere one time, tripped up, made a mistake, and they didn't want to continue moving forward. If you screw up, you just start again. And then if you screw up that next day, like say you had a 5-day streak of this new habit you wanted to build, and then you're like, 2 days off, and now it's all screwed up. Screw it. Worst mentality ever. But you could do 5 days, screw up 2 days, and then you could start the next day. And then if you skip a day because you screwed up again, guess what? You can start again. Eventually it will stick, I promise. Just keep trying. The only thing you can't do is not do something. So keep doing it. Keep trying over and over and over and over until it's done, until it's a habit, until you become the person you want to be. It's that simple. All right, so I highly, highly recommend getting your 135 done at a minimum. And then the 411 is not really something I need to talk about any further. It's more of a framework that holds you accountable to your goals. It makes sure that you're keeping them in line. So, you write down, okay, this is what I said my annual goal was. What do I want to do this month to make sure I'm hitting that annual goal? And then after you have that written down, it's, okay, what am I doing this week to make sure I hit that monthly goal that's going to help me meet that annual goal? And that's just how, like I said, that's how I operate in business and personally, and it will really help you moving forward. So I highly recommend it. And again, if you want to download any of the forms, watch videos on this, and be able to visually get this going, check out the show notes, into3fitness.com, hit up the blog, dive into the show notes, and you'll be able to download all this stuff. and check it out. So I do want to end with ultimately what I want you to do is I want you to determine what you want. We talked about this. This I don't really have goals is not going to cut it. Okay? So what do you want? It doesn't matter what it is, but you need to say it out loud. If you're driving a car right now, say it. What do you want? What do you want? Make a statement. Don't be scared because you might not achieve it or you don't want someone else to hear it. What do you want? Next, I want you to answer, why do you want it? This is the most important question you can answer. Jim Rohn says, when the why gets stronger, the how gets easier. So let that sink in for a second. When the why gets stronger, the how gets easier. How true is that? If you have a gigantic why on why you want to achieve something, how doesn't really matter. How is just, the fine print. It's nothing that's going to stop you. A lot of people get wrapped up on the how. They're like, how am I going to do this? But if I said, you need to lose 10 pounds, and you said, why? And I said, well, if you don't lose 10 pounds, I'm going to kill you. You'd be like, well, damn. All right. I don't care. It does not matter. I don't want to die, so I'm going to lose 10 pounds. You see how that works? Like, you wouldn't question about, oh, well, what about intermittent fasting or keto or carnivore, or vegan? You'd just be like, I'm going to do freaking everything until it's done. That's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to find out, and I'm going to try again. And so really answer that question, why you want it. So what do you want? Make sure you know what you want. No more of this arbitrary BS. What do you want? Why do you want it? Sometimes I have to walk athletes through this exercise of going 5 layers deep. So why do you want it? After you answer that, respond again. Okay, why do you want that thing? You keep answering why to the previous answer. It's kind of like when you have like a 5-year-old. But sometimes we have to do that to find out what your intrinsic motivator is, because these extrinsic motivators aren't very helpful for most people. So the last thing I want you to do is write it down and tell someone. I don't care who you can tell me. Shoot me an email. Write it down and tell somebody about it. So the research is pretty clear on writing down your goals makes you about close to 40% more effective. I think it's 37% last I checked, if you write it down. So you know what you want. You know why you want it. You're going to write it down. You're now 37% more likely to achieve your goal than anyone else. But if you tell someone about it, and this someone can hold you accountable to your goal, you're 76% more likely to achieve it than anyone else. Think about that for a second. What do you want? Why you want it? Write it down. Tell someone, have them hold you accountable. Now, when we talk about this accountability piece, I don't normally recommend that being someone who will ever cut you any slack. If you're going to tell your brother about your goal and your brother doesn't actually care if you complete your goal, and will also be too lenient if you skip out or don't do it, then maybe your brother's not the person who should be holding you accountable. Maybe find somebody else in your community, in Garage Gym Athlete community, wherever it's going to be. Find someone who actually holds you accountable. It doesn't really take no for an answer. Now, you're not going to get punished for it, but when you're like, hey, I said I was going to work out, 4 days per week, and then you have a weekly check-in with someone, and you're like, I worked out 3 days last week. Their response should not be, you know what? Get it next week. Try harder next week. They should be like, well, that's unacceptable. What went wrong? And what are you going to do differently to make sure that doesn't happen again? That's the response you want from an accountability partner, not someone who's just going to let you off the hook. And I've talked about, these fun strategies where you can, write a check to a friend and have that friend either cash the check or give that check to a charity you don't like or whatever if you don't do what you say you're going to do. We have a lot of this kind of training inside a Garage Gym Athlete as well for members. a lot of stuff on accountability and making sure you stick to your goals. So that stuff's in there as well. Another resource in our members area. But this is ultimately what I want you guys to do. So what you want, why you want it, and write it down. And then tell somebody about it and have them hold you accountable. So that's everything, guys. Just a quick recap. A lot of new things coming here to the podcast in 2020. And if you want to get those books I was talking about, it's The One Thing and Deep Work. We have a lot of this stuff in the show notes that you can download, videos to watch, form to fill out. If you're a nerdy goal setter like me, you can check it out. Get your 135s done, and then print off those 401s every month to make sure that you're moving forward and ultimately find out what you want, why you want it, write it down, and tell someone about it. All right, guys, let's crush 2020. I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.